Zimbabwe says it's about to give everyone free internet. Free usually just means the bull hasn't introduced itself yet. So either this is a breakthrough or we're about to witness the most expensive buffering session in history. I actually want this to work. Free internet in Zimbabwe, that would change everything. But getting Wi-Fi to exist is easy. Getting it to work consistently for real people, that's the hard part. And that's where things usually fall apart. Let's go through this because there are a few predictable ways this whole thing can go tits up. The biggest likely failure is confusing rollout with service quality. It's easy to count hotspot sites. It's much harder to keep them fast, secure, and actually usable 6 months later. Because once the launch is over, nobody really cares how many routers were installed. They care about whether the thing works. The second likely problem is underestimating the recurring costs. Routers are the cheap part. They're what you show at the launch. The expensive part is everything that comes after. Monthly bandwidth, power backup, repairs, theft, software updates, support teams, all the things that don't trend on Twitter but decide whether the system actually works. And those costs don't disappear just because the Wi-Fi is labeled free. Third, congestion. The country is already seeing strong growth in subscription and traffic, and free access points in high demand areas can get swamped very quickly. Take a single hotspot at a school or at Copacabana there, and suddenly everyone is on it at the same time. That idea of digital inclusion can shift very quickly into something that feels a lot like competitive buffering. Fourth, abuse and security. Open public Wi-Fi is wonderful, right up until it isn't. It invites spam, malicious traffic, content abuse, unlawful use, and simple freeloading, unless there is proper authentication and monitoring in place. And without that, it stops being a public service and starts looking more like a public crime scene with LEDs. Fifth, politics and procurement. Because this is a ministerial flagship project, there's always a risk that deployment targets are announced faster than the foundations are built. The current reporting gives us numbers and ambition, but not much detail on service level targets, bandwidth per site, uptime commitments, authentication models, or the long-term funding plan. And that missing detail matters, because it's one thing to launch a vision and another thing entirely to keep it working. So the real question is, what would it actually take to make this work? First, they need to be brutally clear about what free Wi-Fi actually means, because that phrase can describe two very different things. One is a limited public service, access to government platforms, education and messaging. The other is a full replacement of mobile data. The first is realistic. The second, it turns into a bandwidth buffet where a few heavy users eat everything and everyone else watches. Second, the backhaul has to be solid. A hotspot without real capacity behind it is just a glowing promise. The data already shows demand is rising quickly. And most of it is concentrated on a few networks. If these public hotspots are fed by weak links, you end up connected but not really online. Third, they need a durable funding model. Free public Wi-Fi only survives if the subsidy for bandwidth, maintenance, power, and refresh cycles is ring-fenced for years, not just for the launch ribbon and some camera flashes. Fourth, they need site selection discipline. The stated focus on schools, clinics, libraries, growth points, and service centers is sensible because those sites have clearer developmental value than random symbolic hotspots in places chosen mainly for political theater. Fifth, there have to be limits. Per user caps, time restrictions, some level of access control. Otherwise, the network gets overwhelmed very quickly. Without that, it stops being public access and starts behaving like a queue no one can move through. Finally, this comes down to operations. Because hardware is the easy part, keeping it running is the real job. Things like maintenance, monitoring, security, repairs, local ownership, fast fault response, all the invisible work that determines whether the system actually survives. A hotspot with a dead power supply isn't digital revolution, it's just decoration. So if the good minister gets most of these things right, then maybe free internet actually means something. If not, well, we already know how that movie ends. In the end, nothing in this world is free. You either pay for it upfront or you pay for it in ways that are harder to measure. Free internet is one of those ideas that looks perfect, right up until it meets reality. And reality is expensive. I'm curious to find out what you guys think of this. Leave a comment below, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, I would be really grateful if you did so. Thank you very much for watching.